So he can do something like this, which is crazy privileged because that means there is no true safe burst points or YRC points in his combos.
What is up, y'all? KRC Pinto here. Welcome back to Secret Sauce. Today, I have with me Macho. Dude, how you doing today?
Doing all right, doing all right. Good to be here playing some Strive, teaching some Zato.
Dude, and so this is my character. This episode's near and dear to my heart, and we just had to get you for Zato after that EVO run, dude.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Repping him in the EVO. That was sick to watch.
Thank you.
How do you feel about him now compared to then? I feel like he got a little love in this last patch.
Yeah, he got some good buffs, right? His 6P increased or decreased, I think, 11 frame startup from 13. Also knocks down on hit, right? Like this is mad good now. His heavy slash like hits round start distance. You can see like that's just like super far now. Like that's super good, and also his unsummon's faster. But I think overall he was already a really strong character. I think he's just better now. I've always joked that like since he was top one, like since the very beginning, like theoretically, in reality he's not top one, but I think he's still super strong. He just takes a little bit of work to like understand and to use and to apply his tools correctly. But his mix is probably the best in the game. His neutral is like super strong as well. Really only loses neutral in a couple of matchups, but yeah, there's still a lot of growth to be made.
Careful, man. We got to keep that downplay game strong.
Yeah, let's get more buffs.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, you know why you're here. I'm going to quiz you about the character. We're going to talk about your approach to playing him and how you make him work. You ready to get started?
Sounds good.
All right, dude. So just to lay the groundwork real quick, if someone has never seen Zato before, what is the elevator pitch of this character? Like, what's he about? Give me like the one sentence sell on Zato.
He's 2-in-1. Two for the price of one. You have his main gimmick, right, is his shadow character, right, his puppet, Eddie, right, this little dude that like crawls around the ground here. He essentially has his own moveset, right, so you can do things like make him do pierce, make him leap across the air, which is a good anti-air button. You have these drills that cover like the whole screen, and then you have this move, oppose, which basically stops any non-metered move. So any move that the opponent does, whether it's a DP, a regular attack, high, low, doesn't matter. As long as it doesn't involve meter, this oppose is taking all the hits and allows you to counterattack. So alone, he's like not super strong. His normals aren't that great. He has a unique flight mechanic, but like it's still a little bit slow to start up. But when you combine all of this elements together with Eddie, you can really start to cover yourself and do all sorts of different pressures. So he's really, learning how to use two characters in one allows you to basically sandwich your opponent and do all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, you got to go into true Galaxy Brain mode to make it work,
yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Sweet. All right. Let's hit you with the low ball here. Just out of curiosity, what was your favorite move of Zato's and why?
Man, that's actually tough because I like to really use all of Zato's tools to like the fullest extent. So I can give you a pitch as to why every move is like really good, but lately, in terms of neutral, I've been finding a lot more use for pierce in neutral. So I've been really messing around with that. So lately, that's been like one of my new favorite moves. Of course, Leap. Leap is probably like my all-around favorite move with this character because this just covers so much screen. This covers so much real estate for very little risk. He's just there, and you get to just run in for free and do whatever you want. Super strong. Oppose obviously is probably his best move, just because it really breaks the way the game works. And then you also have this move, Break the Law, which also breaks how the game works because he's the only character that can just disappear from the screen, like completely. So those are a couple of my favorite moves. Yeah.
Your reasoning's so much better. Like mine's definitely Leap, but it's because he's a frog, and that's it. Like that's
Yeah.
that's fun. He's a frog. Let's go.
It is a frog.
That's pro player mentality versus YouTuber mentality right there. So let's kick it off where the round kicks off. Let's talk about the neutral game. How do you approach neutral with Zato?
Yeah, so neutral with Zato, it depends a lot on the matchup. I would say most matchups that give you time to play the game, that give you space, like let me think really quick. Let me quickly go through the like the list here just to like see matchups like versus Kai, maybe versus Mei a little bit. Potemkin's a little bit different. Faust for sure. Geo a little bit. Anji for sure. Gold Lewis, Jacko. Matchups that are a little bit slower paced. You kind of dictate the pace of the match because you get to really be oppressive with your Eddie summons and how you use Eddie. So your goal kind of is to, it depends on the matchup, but the way I kind of approach this character is take a lot of control with Eddie, you know, be liberal with your Eddie usage. See if they know how to deal with Eddie or not. How much do they like to challenge Eddie? Do they like to rather use a movement instead rather than challenging Eddie? Like, do they like to super jump and then air dash forward to get around Eddie? Or do they like to just block? And then the way they respond to Eddie kind of like dictates how you will like to approach, right? So if I set the opponent to just block the whole time, and I see that they're just going to block, I can go in and just kind of like run my game from there. I can like basically do what I want. If I see they're moving a lot, they like to use the airspace a lot. Then what I'll do sometimes is I'll like do something like this and then bring oppose back out near me. That way I can kind of protect myself and kind of fish for these oppose counter hits. If they like to play the ground game a lot, they like to really dash forward and like FD break. Then what I'll do is I'll do a lot of K release to kind of cover the space in front of me. And if I see once they've like kind of blocked, I can kind of, you know, take my turn that way. But it depends on the matchup. Some matchups are really unique, like the Axel and the Potemkin matchup. You play those matchups very differently. In the Axel matchup, you don't have an opportunity to use Eddie in neutral at all, actually, because Axel's normals are just so good at stuffing him out. You kind of have to play just Eddie or Zato alone and try to get in that way.
That matchup.
But that's yeah, it's hard, but it's doable. But yeah, that's a general overview.
I like it. What in terms of like his normals in neutral, what do you like to use? Because you know he's a character where this is kind of common in this game where he at first glance he's got these big old buttons, but they can get swatted. Like his 2S, for example, you know, reaches all the way across, but you know that can just get love tapped and then you're in trouble. So like, what's your approach when you have him solo to try and like, you know, put them in a block situation or take up some space?
Yeah, so you know, it's hard to talk about every single situation, but I'll say the general kind of rules are, you know, when you want to kind of space someone out, your slash normals are a pretty good bet because they do go really far. They only like, this is like pretty far for a slash normal. The only problem is that they can get stuffed out very easily. 2S is 11 frame startup, but the hurt box goes super far. If you see the hurt box data for this move is almost all hurt box and like very little hitbox. Far slash can kind of be a little bit better in terms of that. The hurt box isn't as big, but it doesn't reach as far. So you can see round start, 2S reaches round start, but round start, far slash does reach round start. I learned something new. You'll see it definitely reaches at shorter ranges. So you'll see here it whip, but 2S connects. And then you have your jabs, which are very slow, but very far reaching. Like this is super far reaching for a jab in this game. It reminds me a lot of Byakuya's jab from Uni, if anyone out there has ever played a Uni. It reminds me a lot of that because it's one of the slower jabs, but it has a very unique benefit of going extremely far. So when you have people like run up at you from like round start distance, you can kind of like mash jab preemptively. and get pressure started that way. Jab, jab, pierce, jab, jab, frog, and basically cover yourself. You have 6P, which is super strong at kind of combating the opponent's fast tools in neutral, like a Soul Far Slash or a Soul 6S. 6P can kind of help be like a preemptive SWAT to that. And then his air game is like really unique and really strong because he can kind of play this uninteractive air game where you have to guess when he's going to come down. And then if you guess wrong, he gets to like start pressure for free. And it's like a great way to delay like getting Eddy meter back too. Like if I just kind of like burn all my Eddy meter and I just kind of like wait up here. And it's like basically nearly all the way full by the time I'm done with that. So yeah, those are just some of the neutral tools that are probably most useful. Definitely his slashes and his jabs are probably where you're going to be using the most.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. How do you feel about I know this move is one that people kind of focus on with this character because in older games, Invite Hell is a lot stronger on its own than it is in this game, but it also does take up a lot of space for ground game. How do you feel about Invite Hell as a neutral tool?
You have to use it. It's so strong as a neutral tool because the hitbox lingers for so long. Like all the time that you see the animation there going on, there's hitbox there. Like I've won tournament sets because people have thought the hitbox is gone and they just dash up right into it. It's a super good at covering the ground against characters that have very good or very fast aerial mobility, like a Leo air dash forward JH or like a Giovanna air dash forward JH. You want to be careful and you want to like make sure you use Invite Hell when you either have meter to like FD it or if they're like you kind of have some sort of plus frames, like they just got back from a jump or they just backdashed or something. It's a good way to just kind of stall until you get Eddy back, and then you can use a much more prominent space control tool in neutral. It's also great for just after block strings. It like spaces you out more. Now you're in like a more favorable spacing as opposed to like being like right here where Soul can far slash you. Yeah, I would say definitely understand when to use Invite Hell in neutral. You know, use it a lot at first. You'll notice when you're getting punished for it. And then don't do it in those situations. And then you'll have great Invite Hell usage.
I want to circle back to one of the moves you brought up earlier, Break the Law. So I don't think that everyone necessarily understands how this move works. So, you know, another one where at glance, Break the Law probably looks useful to some newer players in a neutral situation, but correct me if I'm wrong, the recovery becomes longer the longer you're hidden, correct?
Yeah, you do not want to use Break the Law in neutral situations. That's like a very common misconception about this character. People are like, oh, you can just like... People ask me all the time, like, is Break the Law good in the Axel matchup? Because you can just do this. You can just get in and like do that. Like, no, you are going to get punished super hard for doing that. Like, that's not how you use the move. This move is use it for a couple of things. Mix-ups for one. You can do some cool mix-ups with it. Let's see, do I have to set to block? I do. So you can do kind of cross-up mix-ups like this. Oops. Right, and go to the other side. And if the computer wasn't set to block everything, that last pierce would have crossed them up. And then you would have gotten a full combo from that. Another thing that it's useful for is kind of like resetting your pressure. So in the corner, kind of a common kind of series of things to do is there's a lot of different ways to reset pressure. You can reset pressure with 6H, which is something I really love to do because I think 6H is super strong. You can fish for counter hits with this move, which is Drunkard Shade. And another way to reset pressure is using Break the Law. So if we do like a common sequence like 2K2D, right? So you're negative here, right? As a Zato player, if you do 2K2D and they block. But there's a couple of things you can do. You can do 2K2D, into Invite Hell, and you can see at the very end there, they block the Invite Hell, right? So if they don't do anything, then you know that you can kind of gain plus frames that way. You can do Break the Law if you think they're going to poke back and then counter poke them. So let's see if I can set them to... It's hard to like actually get a punish, but like you can do something like that. Of course, like right if you time it wrong, you're going to get counter hit. But, you know, the goal is not to necessarily hit them, but it's kind of like reset your pressure. You can and get some more like time back for your eddy meter. Because you only do this kind of stuff when you really don't have eddy meter. So that's another way to kind of like do weird like pressure reset things. And then another tool is to bait YRCs and burst, which I think is probably the best use for the move right now. So if I set the opponent... Let me get rid of this. If I set them to, let's say, YRC on the first possible hit. So you can normally bait YRC with like jabs, right? If I jab and block, I can punish afterwards. But some moves you can't block afterwards. So like Heavy Slash, that's like a true YRC point for them. You can also jump cancel with like Close Slash to bait YRC too. So universally, every character can jab and block, and they can like Close Slash, jump cancel, and block. But Zato is unique because Zato can do any normal at all to break the law and bait both YRCs and bursts. So he can do something like this, which is crazy privileged because that means there is no true safe burst points or YRC points in his combos. So like the mind game, like the defensive mind game against Zato is really like messed up in Zato's favor. I think that's like his like strongest point with Break the Law, because you are breaking the rules of the game. No other character can do that.
As advertised.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, those are definitely the biggest uses for Break the Law. Definitely do not use it in neutral. If you have meter, you can maybe do like something like this. Like that's cheeky, I guess, but it's still not like, it's not great. There are more like consistent ways to win rounds with meter than just like doing this. It's a gimmick really to like use it in neutral.
So we've delved into pressure territory a good bit here. So let's keep that train rolling, especially since this character is a pressure demon. You've got left-right setups, you've got high-low setups, you've got strike-throw setups. What are your favorite ways to make your opponents sweat with Zato?
Yeah. Oh man, this is why I love this character.
Go off. Have a good time.
So basically, it's all about layers, right? And it's all about understanding. You know, the more you play an opponent, you want to understand, you know, what is their level of understanding of Zato, and then what do they like to do on defense. So the layer one that you always have to like ask the opponent is, do you know how to block? Like, can you consistently block 5D? So you do something like this. Whoops, let me get that out of the way. You do something like this, right? That's an overhead, and then that'll like be like a full combo. So let's set them to crouch and not block. So and then do some unsummon stuff, right? You just ate 40% because you couldn't block a 20 frame overhead. Like that's super strong. Yeah. And that's going to get every player. I still have never met a single player that when you mix up 5D with the rest of what Zato can do, like you cannot block 5D consistently. It's super hard to block. He also has 6K, right, which is another overhead. Actually, I don't have health generation to... Okay. You have 6K, which is another overhead, so like it keeps them on their toes, right? You have two different animations for overheads. So you have this. That's not as much damage, but keeps them on their toes. It's also safe. So this move is -2 on block, as opposed to Uncharged Dust, which is -15 on block. So this move's a lot safer. You also have lows, so Close Slash and a Dust is like a very common thing, but also Close Slash and a Sweep. is a common thing to do as well. So let's set them to stand this time. So this time they're going to block the dust. And right, we're plus still, so let's do that sequence again. And it's really hard to react to, again, 40% because you didn't block low. And like this entire sequence, you're plus. You know, 60% because you didn't block low. So close slash is like, I guess the first mix-up sequence you should learn is what to do off of close slash when you have Eddie out. You can go dust, you can go low, and then you can also go for an opposed grab setup, which is done like this. So we have that, and then we have this, right? So let's say your opponent's defense is getting a little too good. You're like, wait, they're blocking like close slash and a dust pretty consistently, because that is reactable. But you're like, you know what? Let me get them with the grab. So you can do this. Grab them for it. Again, they're eating 50% because they wanted to block. Again, super strong. So the way you do that is you have to plink slash into heavy slash to get the oppose out, and then you have to unrelease heavy slash. So the input kind of looks like that, if you can see my inputs, and then you release heavy slash. You don't really see the release, but I'm holding it here. You can see I still have it held, and then I release it. So it looks like this. Because if you don't release it, if you don't plink it, you're gonna get this. Right? Now you're really far, and you don't want to be far. You want to be right up in their face when you do that. So that's basically the basic three-way setup off of close slash, right? You can go grab, you can go high, you can go low. That's what I would say is like the first thing, first mix-up thing you should learn, because that by itself will get you far. It's not enough to get you to the top level. You have to do more stuff to get you to the top level, but like that alone will probably put you in like the top 10% of Zatos if you can master just that.
So I think just for people who are either new to or aren't aware of the characters, this example was like this, and I feel like this is common going forward, but most of the stuff is layered around Pierce. Because Pierce has the gap between the two hits, correct? Is that generally, that's like the tool that enables all the shenanigans. Okay. Yeah, just for anyone who doesn't know, Pierce does hit twice, and there is a tiny little space between the two hits, and that's where you can add something extra like a high or a low and start creating these mind games where people aren't sure what to do, and then the Pierce will hold them in place after you do that and allow for another normal afterwards.
Yeah, so the mind game with Pierce is that, like you said, the opponent can challenge it. So let's set the opponent to like 2p after block. So in neutral, like they Pierce, and he can just swat him away. But in the corner, you have a lot more flexibility because you can jab yourself and cover Eddie, and now you create a counter hit situation. Where you can basically deny the ability for them to challenge out of the pressure. Now they have to hold it, and it's kind of true. And what you kind of want to do with Zato is, if you cover Pierce every time, you kind of sacrifice some mix-up potential because you're losing frame advantage. So what you kind of want to do is, as you get more advanced, kind of change up when you do and when you don't cover Pierce. Because that allows you to quickly take advantage of situations that you shouldn't be able to, and your opponent cannot react. Like they have to like high commitment guess just jabbing a Pierce, and that's like very not in their favor. Because if they get hit, they're taking a ton of damage.
Sets up the conditioning game a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because once they're holding both hits, then it's party time.
Oh yeah.
So we've got the high-low setup. We've got the basics, the layer 1. Just for fun here, what's your go-to layer 2? How do you start getting crazy in the mind games here?
Yeah, so You know, with Zato, it gets to a point where you can really just kind of pick and choose your mix-ups. Right now, I'm really experimenting a lot with his fuzzy options because, like I mentioned earlier, like this is all. Let me get the counter hit. Um, this layer 1 is reactable. Like I have met players that can like consistently choose the correct option like on reaction. So he has other ways to make it so you cannot react. Like it's a true 50-50. Um, so some ways to do that are with drill. So this move right here. Um, a great example is after grab. You can do it off of like a far of a heavy slash too, but off of a grab. Set up a drill. You can go for a fuzzy situation, like very similar to Dragon Ball, where you kind of jump and then you can like air dash or empty low. Except you air dash, you don't actually air dash. You use his JD, which is this like delayed overhead that can kind of like travel some distance, right? So regularly it kind of looks like this, but in the corner it puts you in a situation where it hits on the same frame basically. So they kind of have to guess between high or low. So you do something like this. Whoops. You can go empty low, or you can go high, and they have to hold it. And it gets a lot crazier too because that's just the layer 1. He actually gets a ton of more fuzzies off of that as well. So he can go double low. So you can see I did low there twice. That's low into overhead. You can go high into low. Like that. He can go high into high. And then again, after all of that, you still got Eddy meter and you're still plus. So even if they manage to block this, you can still set up like a JD, or sorry, a 5D. You know, the odds of them blocking all of that is super low. So Zato can actually set fuzzies up off of all of his Eddy moves except for oppose, because oppose doesn't have a hitbox until the very end, right? You use oppose more for grab setups. So drill, so that's how you set the fuzzy up off of drill. Pretty simple. You just kind of jump and then fall. He has a fuzzy setup off of frog. So if you do frog, it's similar. You jump, but the timing is different. Instead of JD versus 2K, the mix-up becomes you do falling JK, and then it's do you go into JD or not, or do you fall and do 2K? So it looks something like this. So this is high into low, and this is high into high. Whoops. It takes a little bit of practice to get the timing down. But it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Well, I keep doing the other setup. And then you can go low into low, or high into low. And then off of Pierce, this is probably the latest setup I've been working on most. Is using 6H in conjunction with Pierce to set up high lows. So you can do something like this. Right, that's a high. Oops. It takes a little bit of practice. That's a low, right? So this versus this is like virtually unreactable. You can also go double high as well. So that's the fuzzy off of Pierce. This is probably the hardest one for sure because it takes the most practice. But with practice, you're getting a fuzzy for 1/3 of your Eddy meter, which is super strong. And you can actually set a throw setup in there too. So you can do something like this. It's really hard, but.
Are you going for it between the Eddy hits?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There it is.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's devious.
So you can do high, low, double high, double low, or command grab. And the timing, it's pretty strict. You have to, basically, long story short, you input dash and pierce at the same time that you connect with the move. Whoops. Anyways, you saw me do it once.
Yeah, that's
it's a
strict,
little tricky. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that the command grab is really unforgiving on whether or not they're still in hit stun. So I can imagine that is.
Yeah, that setup in
tight.
particular is kind of tricky. In regular pressure, you can kind of do like it's a little bit easier in regular pressure. Um, but like yeah, you can see like I can do consistently just like timing it, but I'm trying to have like an auto time setup where you truly have to guess between like every option, right? That's what makes it a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Man, that's crazy. I can melt some brains with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the other fun layer of pressure Zato has, which I would consider his Oki game pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about this a little bit, but let's talk about it like from the basic standpoint. So Zato's a character where like from a sweep you can summon and set up drills, right? How often do you find yourself like going into that? Like I feel like that's the level 1 play you get with him. Is that something you do often?
Yeah, so it's interesting. My goal as a Zato player is actually not to get a sweep. My goal is to get you to block, because I feel like the opportunities to get a sweep in this game are not very high. It doesn't happen as often as getting the opponent to block. And this is like a preference thing. I know other Zato players, they want to go more for sweeps and more for like full Eddy gauge setups, right? Because my style is kind of get you to block this, and then now I have like a mix up here. But now I'm left with very little Eddy meter, right? So I'm kind of gambling that the one setup I do is going to work. Because it usually does, because this character is crazy hard to block. But when it comes to Oki, what's so strong about it is that you get to set up Eddy, and you get all of your Eddy bar to work with, like right away. So let's set them to... Yeah, let's set them to do this. So if I hit you with a sweep, like now you're in sandwich pressure, you have to eat a full Eddy bar mix-up. I like to go... If I ever get a sweep, I always like to go for the fuzzy just because that's a guaranteed 50-50. It doesn't matter how good of you are as a player, like, you have to hold a 50-50. That's supposed to be 2K, but... Right, you don't get a ton of damage, but it's a guaranteed to open up your opponent 50% of the time. Other things you can do is set up sandwich pressure using Pierce. So against DP characters, you can do that kind of thing. So the way you do that is you do one drill and then Drunkard Shade. So that's what's unique about this Drunkard Shade move, right? It kind of sends Eddy towards them. If Eddy is at Zato's level or in front of him, right? If Eddy is behind Zato, Drunkard Shade won't send them out. So that's important to note. When you're doing pressure, you got to make sure Eddy is at Zato's level or in front of Zato, and then he'll be shot out. If Eddy is behind Zato, Drunkard Shade's not sending them anywhere. So you can set up situations like that. And then now they can't challenge Eddy, right? They can't challenge Eddy during Pierce because he's behind him. He can't hit them. So you unlock a whole... Really, you can do a lot of the same setups that you do in the corner, but you can actually do more setups because now you have access to left-rights, right? So when you get a knockdown, this is super strong. I think this is like Marlin Pie's preferred Oki setup because it is DP safe. So DP characters cannot DP through this. This is also DP safe, but you do use half of your Eddy bar just for one mix-up. Granted, it's a true 50-50, but you know, you decide how to like manage your Eddy meter. You decide what you want to put, what you want to weigh more heavily. But I have been messing around with this more, just because it's more conservative with Eddie meter. Um, but yeah, that's basically his Oki game. In the corner, understand that throw equals hard knockdowns, right? Like I said earlier, you get to set up this pressure for free off of a throw. Also, if you have a sweep, you know, same thing. You can do basically whatever you want. Yeah, that's basically the basics of his Oki. His setups are that, and also what I usually go for, which is invite hell, and then drills to the other side.
So this is something that's come up in the past couple setups, but I think we should probably talk a little bit about managing the Eddie meter well, because obviously it's pretty crucial to have Eddie on deck to be able to do all of the sick things we've been talking about. But you know, managing that meter can be hard. People don't always pay attention to an extra meter on the screen. When do you try to find opportunities to like unsummon and refresh, or like use some void to refresh? Like, what's your kind of strategy around making sure you have the meter when you need it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, some of the questions that I ask myself on when to do unsummons in pressure are like, how proactive, how good are they at the matchup? Like, do they know? Can they react to unsummon? Because you can react to unsummon and kind of punish Zato before he gets to do anything else, because you are pretty minus. So if I see they're very proactive, they fidget around a lot, they jump around a lot, they press buttons when they probably shouldn't, then unsummoning and pressure is probably something I'm going to do maybe a little bit less, or I'm going to try to unsummon in safer spots. So for example, you can do, I think Gobo was the first person to start doing this, was start unsummoning during drill, because if you can see here, it's harder to showcase now after the patch because they changed it. Excuse me, they changed it a little bit, but you can kind of summon a drill, unsummon, but the drill stays there. So you can kind of cheat out some more frame advantage than you're supposed to. So you can do something like this. Whoops. Whoops. It's a little bit harder now. So if you saw there, I was able to basically use half my Eddie meter, unsummon, and now I have the other half again to work with. So that's one way to kind of unsummon. It's going to work most times, but against good players, they're going to see, like, when are you at the end of your Eddie meter? Like, are you likely to unsummon here? And then they'll be ready to like, punish you for it. So don't get too predictable with, like, your strings. Don't do the exact same unsummon strings, because you're going to get predictable. Another way to unsummon is during Toad, because same with Drill. If you unsummon during Toad, Toad stays out in the air. So as you can see, like, when I kind of like put my hands out like that, that's the unsummon animation, right? When I kind of wave my hands outwards.
Right.
But when I do Toad, you can see, whoops, I'm unsummoning, but the Toad is still there. So let's show what that kind of looks like. So you can see, like, I acted like I was able to hit him while he was still in block stun. Like, all that was a true block string. Right? So you can kind of unsummon that way. And ways to do that is off of 2D and 5D. So let's say I get like a Pierce to start. I can kind of reset pressure that way, and also off of 5D.
I saw you sneak the drill one in there too.
Right, yeah. Right, so that's kind of how unsummon works in pressure. In neutral, you want to be unsummoning all the time, because unsummoning keeps the opponent on their toes as to when they can punish Eddie. So if I shoot Eddie out here with Drunkard Shade, I'm almost always unsummoning this, because I don't want them to have the ability to poke Eddie afterwards. If I have Eddie out here, drill, just to cover some space, unsummon, get Eddie back, unsummon here, unsummon here. Really, like, you're unsummoning all the time in neutral, just to, like, cover different options. And if you see like some high-level Zato gameplay, you'll see how full screen, a lot of players like to do like single hit pierce on summon to like kind of check to see like, are they going to jab in between the 2 hits, right? Because normally you should be jabbing in between here because that's a free punish on Eddie. But it's a way to check like, what do they do? And you can unsummon and there's no way for them to punish that. Also like putting out a pose, see if they run into it. If they don't, unsummon, code, take some space, unsummon, they can't punish that. Yeah, so a neutral, it might be very tempting to do things like this and go in, but now you don't have any meter, right? So you don't want to do that because now your mix-ups are pretty whack. You're limited to really just strike throw. And if you get hit, then you're losing the round, basically. So that's kind of how Unsummon works generally. And then you have Sun Void, right, which you mentioned refreshes all of your Eddy meter. And Sun Void is super cheap because there are ways to... You can actually do this. And it's a viable strategy now. Because now like, you're able to basically cheat out 2 whole Eddy meters and have that be like a full block string. You can also do it. I think like heavy slash into Sun Void is like a 1 frame or a 2 frame gap, so characters cannot use normals to beat it. They have to use either like a DP or an invincible super to beat this gap. And Sun Void into Pierce is a true block string. So this is actually they cannot do anything once they get hit by Sun Void. All of that's true. So I can do something like this. Let's go low. They block that. Right, like that. They had no interaction during that entire sequence, except for maybe a DP because it's Soul. But like characters that don't have DPs, that was an uninteractable sequence from the opponent, which is like crazy strong how you can use Sun Void like that.
The risk gauge is off the screen.
Mm-hmm. It cranks risk like crazy too.
Man, okay, we talked about the perks of playing Zato for a while now, but I think now it's time to talk about maybe one of the more lacking areas. So, we can make people block all day, but at the end of the day, it's a fighting game. Sometimes we gotta block.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to block.
What do you do when you have to play defense with Zato? This is a hole in his game. He has no reversal super, no basic reversal, but you got to play it. What's your strategy around defense with this character? Yeah,
so when it comes to Zato, in most things in life, especially in fighting games, you're only ever as strong as your weakest link, and defense is part of the the chains that make you a complete fighting game player. Defense, you need to really understand like how defense works in Guilty Gear Strive, like using the system mechanics really well. Because system mechanics alone will like make you probably like top 10% defensive players in this game. Just understanding how to defend opponents' options, knowing the matchups. This obviously like this isn't very juicy or like good Zato because like that's the point. The character is supposed to have bad defense, right? So you have to really rely on system mechanics, understanding like how to use FD, when to use FD, when to use your burst, how to manage like your YRCs and your bursts. I would say the one saving grace for his defense is his jab, because like we said, his jab reaches really far. So if the opponent gets pushed to an unfavorable position by your FDs, you can challenge with a fast like a relatively fast, far-reaching normal. So that's probably one of his only saving graces on defense, is that he has a really unique option, and that's a very far-reaching jab that you can FD after for pressure and a full combo if it hits, right? So you don't even have to hit them. If you can just connect with it, like now they're eating, now you took your turn back, right? So that's one of the ways to use meter with this character is defensively use jab to FD, or sorry, to RC afterwards, and you kind of take your turn back. something that I'm seeing only like the really top level players Zato doing right now is that, like, we have to find a way to like mash out of pressure, and keeping a bar to do this. Like, this is our reversal DP, like our reversal super, even though it's unfortunately not a reversal. We just have to pick our fastest move and then RC and take our turn back. So I would say that's his only like defensive gimmick. Other than that, you gotta hold it. You gotta like learn the system well, and get good at defending.
His fastest button is 6 frames, right?
Yeah, his 2 jabs, 6 frames.
Yeah,
Those are his fastest buttons.
that's hard to stomach with Mr. 3-frame 5K on the screen.
Yeah,
right there.
it's hard. It's hard.
But that's the trade-off for Mixed City, is you gotta suffer a little bit. And yeah, I think it's important to know if you're a Zato main that Amorphous is not getting you out of a situation.
Oh, this super.
Don't
yeah,
bust out. Don't do it.
It is not invincible.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, his air dash also becomes a bit of an issue because of the startup. Do you ever try to like super jump in like JD out of stuff? Is that something you ever go for?
Yeah, so that is a good way to kind of escape pressure. So I do come from like a Marvel background, and in Marvel, the best way to block something is to not be there in the first place. So yeah, JD, like as you know, his air dash kind of has this slow startup. As you can see, he kind of like crosses his arms and then moves forward. So because of that slow startup, and because the dash itself isn't very fast, especially compared to all the other characters in the game, his JD becomes his air dash because it comes out very fast and it moves him very quickly. So when you're in the corner doing something like JD into air dash out, and then like heavy slash to kind of cover your landing, that kind of becomes your way to get out of the corner. And then, you know, once you start doing this a lot, your opponent's going to try to air you, or they're going to try to like dash back to wait for your air dash and then take space. And that's kind of where you, like, let's say Soul standing like here, and like you JD, like you don't want to like stay right here, right? Because then they're going to kind of come after you. That's where you can kind of maybe outspace them a little bit, like kind of come down here. Maybe they're expecting you to be right in front of you. They whiff a normal, and then you can kind of get your pressure started. So, right, defensively, it's not very appealing. It's not like you're doing anything crazy. At the end of the day, you're trying to just outplay your opponent. But, you know, with defense, with Zato, you got to find every tiny little thing you can do to gain any sort of advantage.
This isn't necessarily good advice, but I do love to see on occasion the JD PRC that installs the momentum, and you just zoomy straight across the whole screen. That's a good.
No, it actually is. It actually is a very strong tactic. I use it all the time actually, because you get away for free. It's your fastest way out of the corner. You get out of the corner super fast. In certain matchups, like where you just want to get out and you want to gain space, that's one of like the defensive ways to use meter, right? Like, again, you don't have invincible supers, but you have ways to escape, you have ways to challenge. I think this is definitely one of them, and it's fair. I think this is a really fair tool to use because it's very hard for the opponent for them to come all the way and chase you before you can, like, say, set up an oppose. And they have to kind of, if that's their stop sign, right? They kind of have to stop for a second, and now you just reset neutral. Very few characters can like run over and punish him in time.
Yeah, I guess there's probably not too much more to go in on defense here, but yeah, do you think FD is the mechanic you should try and master first? You know, there's a lot of options here. Is that kind of like the basis?
You know, I'm not even really sure, to be honest. I think it's definitely something that people should add to their like defensive repertoire, is knowing when FD is good. And that's just like knowing system things. That's not even specific to Zato. It's like, for example, you're going against Soul Far Slash. Nowadays, FD is really good against Soul Far Slash. So just knowing things like that, or like ram corner pressure, knowing that FD kind of makes them have to think a little bit more. I think FD can definitely help lessen a lot of certain mix situations. like against Melia too. They can't just close slash like a trillion times in your face. If you FD, they kind of have to run back in. They have to do something else. That's more like, that's not really a pro Zato tactic. That's more like just an anti the cast tactic, right? Just understanding the game really.
Right.
And I think also just understanding like when to use things like YRC, burst, other ways to defensively spend meter, like we talked about, jab, red RC, or the JD PRC. I think FD is probably a good starting point. I think probably a better starting point is probably burst and YRC, because those are the two obvious defensive mechanics that are like in front of everyone's face. Understanding what's a good burst, what's a good YRC. And I think just, I mean, that's basic Guilty Gear, right? That's not unique to Zato, but I think that'll take Zato's defensive game up a lot.
Yeah, mastering those things is definitely a little more crucial than with Mr. DP bad guy over here.
Yeah.
Word. Okay, so next question is the last question. Before we go to that, is there anything that we haven't touched on for Zato that you think is important for people to know, or something that like is in your back pocket that you think is worth sharing?
I think I would say, just, you know, Zato's a very complex character. He's the hardest character in the game for a reason, right? You're playing two characters at once most of the time. I would say just make sure you understand what every move is used for, why you use every move, and when to use them. You know, for example, there's a difference between 2K and 5K. There's a reason why you may use one versus the other. There's a difference between JP and JK, right? When would you want to use one versus the other? And it would take like a ton of time to go through every move in depth. But I would say go through his normals, you know, see when top players use those normals and try to understand why they use that versus a different normal. His special moves, understand when to use Invite Hell, why to use it. Drunkard Shade, you'll see people use Drunkard Shade in like situations that kind of make you scratch their head. Like, you know, understand why to use those moves. Break the Law, of course. His command normals like 6P and 6H. And then, of course, all of his Eddy moves, right? Understand when to use Eddy, how to use Eddy. You know, knowledge is key with this character. Understand that it's going to take you a lot of time to get everything down, especially the muscle memory and the execution and the neutral awareness, especially because you're playing two characters at once. You have to keep track of three things, right? Both your characters and the opponent. It's going to take time, but as long as you know what every move is used for, you can kind of go back and think, what other move could I have used that was probably better in that situation, and stuff like that, yeah. So I would say just knowledge is key with this character.
All right, Macho. If someone came to you tomorrow and said, dude, thinking about picking up Zato 1 and Guilty Gear Strive, but I'm kind of on the fence about it, what are you saying to them to push them over the fence? Why should someone play this character in Guilty Gear Strive?
First question I would ask them is, do they like mix? And if the answer is yes, I would say, all right, Zato is one of the top characters you should play. His mix potential is, like I said, the best in the game. He has access to basically every mix-up tree at all times between like strike, throw, high, low, overhead. He's the only character that can fuzzy without meter, like we talked about, right? He's the only character that can do high lows like that. Every other character requires meter. He can do a bunch of other crazy shenanigans that I didn't go over, like triple overhead setups or like shit like this. he can do really crazy stuff that the opponent is going to have a hard time tracking.
Seems like your only limit is your imagination and your Eddy meter.
Exactly. He can do a lot of really crazy stuff. But you know, as long as you understand that it's going to take time, and especially if you want to challenge yourself, and you want a character with a super high skill ceiling that'll take you to like make you real big brained, then I would say pick Zato.
Do you have any tips for people who've never played a negative edge character before?
So there's a lot of drills you can do to kind of get your muscle memory there. So a very common drill is I would do like heavy slash, right? So this is a really good drill to do. So essentially all you're doing here is you're holding down 2H or 2S. You're doing invite hell, which makes you do a heavy slash. So you're holding down 2 buttons, and then you have to press the punch button to get Eddie to do pierce. So hold, pierce, hold, pierce. So that's like a good drill to do. You can kind of figure out your own drills. You know, when it comes to setups, like things that you're gonna do that are based on muscle memory, you know, you can practice out the negative edge, right? Like you can really, you're gonna do the same setup every single time. So, you know, it's gonna take time at first, but that's something you can practice. I think what makes Zato especially hard is negative edging in neutral, because now you're not just doing a mindless string that you've practiced. You have to really think, what button am I using as Zato? And then what does that restrict me to do with Eddie? And then vice versa. Like if I want to do close slash, heavy slash, invite hell into drills. So I want to do like this and then this, all while Eddie is out. So if I have Eddie out, I can do this, but I can't do the invite hell, right? Because what that's going to mean is that means I have to let go of heavy slash to press heavy slash for the invite hell, which is going to activate a pose, right? So understanding like you can't use certain moves all the time. That's probably the highest level of Zato, and I would say don't worry about that yet, because you'll get there like eventually. I would say just focus on doing some basic pressure drills, because this doesn't require thinking. You're gonna lab out the muscle memory, and then eventually you're just gonna have it. But when it comes to neutral, after a couple of 100 hours with the character, then you'll start to like understand like what you can do and when. But yeah, it's hard because it's not intuitive, right? You kind of have to really rewire your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.